Thank you.
Mr. President, what do you ask of Milosevic?
The President of the United States, live and direct from the briefing room, the press briefing room at the White House. The President saying that he will address the nation perhaps in more detail and fuller this evening. What he said was that he would address the nation tonight. We do not know the time for that. We'll pass it along to you just as soon as we have it. The President's other points were that is in his view that the dictator of Serbia, Milosevic, has, quote, chosen aggression over peace. The President's main point was that in his opinion, if we, that is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in the United States, don't act now, we pay a much higher price later and would have to act eventually. Three objectives he outlined. One, a possible objective, and that may be an important point to underscore at the moment. Number one, to oppose Serb aggression. That's number one on the President's list of objectives. Number two, to make the Serbs begin paying a price. The sense has been that the Serbs have had so-called no-risk shots to savage the ethnic Albanians in Kosovo, and the President puts number two on his list, making the Serbs begin to pay a price for that. And then he said possibly, mark the word possibly, if the Serbs don't stop, and presumably stop fairly soon, then possibly damage their ability to wage war. The suggestion there is, of course, going after war production facilities inside Serbia itself. Now, and the President also pointed out in the gravest possible tones that there may be American casualties. Diplomacy mixed with force in Bosnia, the President pointed out, eventually paid some dividends in his opinion, and diplomacy mixed with force he's hoping will now do the same with this crisis in Kosovo. We go back to David Martin at the Pentagon. David, the attacks are underway, and we're hearing more and more reports of more and more weaponry raining down death and destruction on the Serb forces, both inside Kosovo and in Serbia itself.
I think that's important to note, Dan, that these strikes are going to begin by going after targets throughout the former Yugoslavia. That's because the air defense network that they're trying to disable has nodes throughout the country, and they're going after all of these. That's why Mark Phillips can hear things going off on the outskirts of Belgrade, and at the same time, Alan Pizzi hears explosions down in Kosovo, in Pristina. The concept of operations here is to first disable the air defenses and then to basically draw a line across the southern part of the country. It's on the map, it's the 44th parallel, and go after all of the military targets below that parallel. Those would be essentially the forces that are in and around Kosovo that are carrying out this offensive, which the President said is even increasing as he spoke, with more Serbian troops going into Kosovo. Whether or not Milosevic is going to change his mind as soon as he sees the damage that has been done to his air defense system, obviously only Milosevic knows. There will be sort of notional pauses here for him to have time to cry uncle, because most of this operation is going to be conducted at night, as operations against Iraq were. So during daylight hours, there will be a natural pause. I think the real question here is how long is NATO prepared to keep this up? Because, of course, you have to, in order for this to be a NATO operation, you have to have the agreement of a number of democratic countries, not just the United States. And then you have to ask the question, what happens if NATO starts to lose aircraft? How long is it willing to keep that up? And I think what Milosevic must be counting on is that he's going to be better able to stand the pain than NATO. But we'll just have to see about that.
Indeed. David Martin at the Pentagon. Let's turn again to Buster Glosson, retired U.S. Air Force general and the commander of U.S. Air Forces in the Gulf War. Put a frame around this for us. Put it in context. We're in the early going, it's mostly missile attacks, but not confined to missile attacks.
Well, Dan, we should characterize it really as massive, because these initial steps are massive. And the only question is, do we have the staying power and the courage to see it to the end? Because as we speak, the B-52s, 6 or 8 of them, each one carrying about 24 cruise missiles, are in fact attacking Serbia and Kosovo throughout. So are the cruise missiles from the submarines and the missile cruisers in the Adriatic and in the Mediterranean. That will be followed, as David said, by the B-2, 3 or 4 or 5 of those B-2s, each one hitting 8 to 10 targets, and then, weather permitting, the 117s. Then it'll be followed by tactical airplanes. So make no mistake, this is a massive attack on Serbia proper, especially their communications, their power grid, their air defense systems, and all the things that can support that army. And again, the only question is, who has the staying power, us or Milosevic?
Let's go to the map here, if I can call up the map of the region, because it's important to, when we're talking about context and perspective, to see what's at stake here. This, of course, is a map of Europe as a whole. The area being affected is just to the east of the boot of the Italian, heel of the Italian boot. Now, and closer, and this is not, by the way, to scale. Kosovo is smaller than Serbia as a whole. But Kosovo is a part of Serbia, and the argument, the whole cutting edge of the debate is whether Kosovo is to be independent of Serbia. Important to note, it is not an objective of United States policy to have Kosovo be independent. Reason, the President Clinton and others have argued, is that if you insist on the Kosovo having independence, there are other former states of Yugoslavia that are not free that would then begin to insist on independence, and there's some concern that it would be a sort of rolling effect. Now, but Kosovo, the U.S. policy, so if we don't want independence for them, what do we want? We want them to have at least a semi-autonomous government within Serbia itself and not be subjected to what the president himself has described as the savagery of the Serbs trying to keep down the ethnic majority in Kosovo. Now, if we go to the map of the region that shows Serbia, Kosovo, and in relationship to look at all the countries around, you say, well, this seems a small thing. Remember that World War I started in this very region, and you could make an argument when you bring in Croatia a little bit more to the north that some of World War II started in this same region. This is a volcano as far as Europe is concerned. If we're going to talk about the stability of Europe as a whole, there's no such thing as long-range stability of Europe as a whole, so the argument goes without stability in this very region. Now, when you see these other smaller countries around Kosovo, countries and sections, Macedonia, Bulgaria, even Romania, the fear here, and there's some real concern about this, is that Milosevic, the Serbian dictator, has the capacity with his ground troops to attack, say, Montenegro, Albania, even Bulgaria itself. Remember, down to the south and below here, there's Turkey and Greece. They are watching this situation very, very carefully. And then, of course, to the north, countries such as Germany has to be concerned about what happens in here. So you say, well, gosh, all this seems confusing. Keep in mind that one of the objectives is to keep the peace and stability, relatively so, that has prevailed in Europe since the end of World War II. And the concern in world capitals, nowhere more than in Washington, is that if there isn't an act now to stop what's been cast as the Serbian aggression, then this whole situation has a real potential for spilling over into other areas and bringing in the major powers of Europe and being sucked into a situation that could go greater in a hurry. Now, that's what President Clinton is talking about when he says that, yes, there are risks, real risks, with what's being engaged in now, what's been launched off, but in his opinion, the risks in the future are much greater if we don't act now. Let's go to the White House and Scott Pelley. Scott, what do we know about the president's plans to address the nation tonight?
Dan, the president will address the nation from the Oval Office at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here at the White House. We are told that the address will last 15 or 20 minutes. In that address, you can expect the president to repeat what has been a theme of his over the last couple of days. That is to recall the horrors of World War I and World War II and say that America's children, and in fact the children of the world, deserve a free and stable Europe. The president will be addressing the nation from the Oval Office, 8 o'clock Eastern Time from the Oval Office. Dan?
Scott, very quickly, what is the president's theme of the day? What's the most important sentence, the most important phrase he's issuing?
Dan, I think the most important theme of the day is NATO unity, and you will also hear the president repeat that atrocities were ongoing. He told us here in the briefing room just a few minutes ago that there were some 50,000 refugees on the move, and it was important to stop that before it became any larger of a humanitarian crisis. He called the Kosovo situation a full-blown crisis, and you will hear him say tonight that the United States and its NATO allies were simply forced to act now.
We now join our regularly scheduled program, already in progress.